Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_daddy. Well, it is officially game day. It's time to take a look at the Jacksonville Jaguars a little bit. First of all, though, just a little bit of housekeeping. What is the thing? I don't know. Real quick, we got injury updates or whatever. The Jacksonville Jaguars are upgrading starting left tackle to full go via Mike Garafolo. Jaguars activated linebacker Foye Oluokun from IR, and they say Cam Robinson has cleared concussion protocol. Robinson, who is listed as questionable, has now no game status and will play. To which Duval Till I Die 82 said, "Put him back in concussion protocol. He's a fat slob." So there's that. Also, as we know, Ballantyne will not be playing. The Packers did elevate cornerback Robert Rochelle for this game. Obviously, we hope we don't have to see him at all because there'd be no reason for him to be on the field. But in case of any injury, keep an eye out for Robert Rochelle. And also, as is becoming customary, another Green Bay Packer was fined on a random frickin' Saturday. This via Wendell Ferreira over at Yardbarker. Or actually, A to Z Sports. How do sites get away with this, by the way? They just republish other people's articles and then at the very bottom put in very small print, this was originally on A to Z Sports. It says syndicated with permission, but it's still weird. Anyways, Packers tight end Ben Sims was fined $5,083 for a play against the Houston Texans last Sunday. Sims was punished for unnecessary roughness, leg whip, in a play during the second quarter of the game. Second-year tight end is making $950,000 this season. He was claimed blah, 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 blah. It is the third Packers player fined. Running back Josh Jacobs was fined $45,000 for lowering his head to initiate contact on a play against the Titans, which is the dumbest crap in the world. And last week, cornerback Jair Alexander was fined $11,000 for pushing an Arizona Cardinals player. Wow. What a freaking stupid sport we watch, isn't it? Do you think Dana White would have any interest in buying the NFL? I just wonder. We need somebody that, just has a fraction, just a speck of testosterone to help run the NFL. A running back lowered his head, right? And Jair pushed a guy. Aww. I don't want to do it again. I don't want to go through my little ranty thing about this whole thing, but I am so sick of the people that run the NFL. They are the worst ever. They are such sniveling, coward, loser, pathetic. I give up, man. I can't deal with these frickin' low-life losers. Anyways, let's move on a little bit here. This is going to be kind of a short update. I'm guessing you would know how long this podcast is better than me, but it's 11 o'clock at night, so we got to get rocking here. Also, not a ton to talk about. We already went over the Jaguars a little bit. If you didn't hear it, you can go back and listen to yesterday. As far as their record, as far as the point differential, which again points to the Jaguars not, because let's break this down a little bit. There's a narrative that the Jaguars aren't really as bad as their record would indicate. And my whole thing is, look, sometimes that's true. But I'm not going to give the Packers that excuse, not just because I don't like excuses generally, but because I don't think it's true. I think it's a lame excuse, and I think it sets us up for people that are just kind of scared of this game. There's this feeling of I don't want to get myself too much hope and too much optimism, thinking this is going to be easy, because if it ends up being, I want to prepare myself for this being tough. Go ahead and do that. That's fine. But don't make stuff up. So they are a 2-win football team. They've beaten the Colts and the Patriots, two of the worst teams in football, are their only wins so far this season. Sandwiched in between that, they got blown out by the Chicago Bears 35-16. By the way, they are coming off back-to-back games in London. Now, that's kind of an underreported story because I feel like that's a really unfair advantage. When you think about it, they went out to London and they got the crap beat out of them by the Chicago Bears, but then they stayed in London. So they were fully acclimated for 2 whole weeks in London. The New England Patriots had to fly out, were certainly not acclimated, and then they got steamrolled by the team that not only has a lot of familiarity with playing in London, but has been there for 2 weeks. Anyways, they have to come home now. It's kind of an unusual situation where they have to reacclimate to their home stadium. But a lot of people have looked at it and they say, well, there's been a lot of close games. They were close against Cleveland. They were close against Miami. They were close against Houston. And so even though, those are somewhat older games, still, a couple close games could have gone a different direction. So you say, okay, well, you look at close. Is it actually close? So you look at point differential. The answer is no. They're one of the worst teams in football in point differential, which means it's not like these games are all very close. The reality is they get the crap beat out of them more so than just about any other team. You say, well, okay, but what about the fact that they've played, Miami and Buffalo and Houston and, some tougher teams? Well, let's look at DVOA. And I looked at DVOA and they're one of the worst teams in football, including having, I believe, the worst defense in the entire NFL. So if you want to give yourself the out, fine. If it makes you feel better, if it makes you, whatever you got to do to get ready for this game, you do what you got to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I'm not giving them that excuse. If they happen to lose this game, I'm not giving them, I'm not, just so you know, if they happen to lose the game and you call in and say, look, I think Jacksonville was always better than this, the other, I'm not going to let that go because they're not. They're not. And look, Chicago went up against Jacksonville. Why didn't Jacksonville beat the crap out of Chicago? Because they're not good, that's why. Chicago went up against a bad team and beat them 35-16. That's what you're supposed to do, and that's what we're supposed to do. And that brings us to then the situation in Florida. Everyone's really worried because this game is in Florida and the Packers don't win in Florida, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I don't necessarily understand where this comes from. So, for the record, and let's just start here, going back to, for whatever reason, 1989, the Packers are 61% win rate in Florida. Their most recent campaigns were against Tampa Bay. They were 4-point favorites and lost. Now, that could be a great example. I do have a couple issues with that. Number one, it was December 17th, so the whole warm weather thing doesn't really apply. If we don't really care about the warm weather thing and it's just the state of Florida has some kind of a curse on the Green Bay Packers, I think we probably remember that game and that stretch where we also lost to the New York Giants. So I don't know that it was necessarily Florida as much as it was this team just fell apart for like 3 games randomly. The game before that was the Dolphins. Actually, it wasn't before that. I think it was right after. No, it was before that. Never mind. That was a different Dolphins game. It must have been in Green Bay. 2022, on Christmas, Miami Dolphins. Do you remember that game? We won it 26-20. Even more interesting, we were 3.5-point underdogs against the Dolphins. The time before that was September 25th, 2022, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We were 2-point underdogs and won 14-12. Then, of course, we had the playoff games against the Buccaneers. We lost that game 31-26 against the Bucs. The game before that was the last time we played the Jaguars in Florida, was actually November 15th, 2020. And we were, let's see, where the heck is it now? That can't be right. Well, we were major favorites and we won the game. Let's just say that. It says we were 13.5-point favorites. We won it by 4. You can take that as a negative if you want, but I'm still holding you to can't win in Florida. Before that, again, we lost to the Buccaneers, right? But then before that, it was we beat the Dolphins, we beat the Buccaneers, we beat the Jaguars, we beat the Buccaneers, we beat the Dolphins, we beat the Jaguars, we beat the Buccaneers. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wins in a row. And then since then, we're 3-3, with 2 of those losses coming against the Tom Brady Buccaneers. The only other loss was that super random one against the Bucs. So, I mean, let's put it this way. The last time we lost to a team in Florida, a Florida team in Florida, I know there's some random weird one in there mixed in. I don't remember what it was. That wasn't the Buccaneers, was the Dolphins in 2010. The last time the Packers have lost to the Jaguars, period, was in 2008. In fact, they have a 5-2 record all-time against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which obviously is only 7 times. They're a pretty uncommon opponent, but only 2 losses. It came in 2004 and 2008. Only one of them was in Jacksonville. So 2008, Green Bay Packers lost 20-16 in Jacksonville. One time the Packers have ever lost to Jacksonville in Jacksonville. And again, the Miami Dolphins, they've kind of kicked the crap out of the Dolphins. Again, the last time they lost was 2010. It was an overtime win where they won with a field goal. And that was in Green Bay. So did I get that wrong? Dolphins, November 11th. I did. That was in Lambeau. So it was actually Jaguars 2008 was the last time the Packers lost to a Florida team in Florida. That wasn't the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And again, that's just 3 times. 2 of them were Tom Brady. We could not beat that team. Dominant defense. Just couldn't do it. And then one was just an absolute random, fluky series of games. Not a game, a series of games where the Packers fell apart and then figured their crap out. But now that I'm looking at more away data, sorry, some of that was wrong, they have now won 5 out of their last 6 games in Florida, going back to 2014. Again, these are Florida teams in Florida. They beat the Dolphins. They beat the Bucs. Lost to the Bucs, beat the Jaguars, beat the Bucs, beat the Dolphins. And then you got to go back to November 8th, 2009. They lost to the Buccaneers. And then again, the 2008, they lost to the Jaguars. The last 2 losses against Tampa were actually in Green Bay. So yeah, there was the 2020 loss in Tampa. Before that, the last time we lost to Tampa was 2009. So if we summarize this a little differently, since 2010, since we last won a Super Bowl, the Packers have, 1 loss in Florida to one of these Florida teams? So I guess I don't know. I've gone over this before. I've done it before, and then everybody still keeps calling in saying, I know we don't win in Florida, and it's like, okay, either everybody missed that episode, everybody forgot that episode, or everyone just listened to it and said, no, you're an idiot. I mean, they had a terrible stretch. If you look at, let's start in 1998 through 2009. It was loss, 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 win, loss, win, win, loss, loss, loss. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 losses and 3 wins in Florida in that stretch. But understand, that was basically the Brett Favre stretch. That was very little Aaron Rodgers. There were maybe 2 games from Rodgers? But since then, and it starts in 2014, you got win, 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 loss, win, win. You say, okay, well, maybe it's not Florida. Maybe it's the temperature. It's supposed to hit like the 80s in Jacksonville tomorrow. It's going to be hot. That's the problem. Okay. Well, since 2009, the Packers are 6-3 when the temperature is 80 or above. The last time they lost, there was the Tampa Bay game in 2020. Then there was 2018, and then you have to go back to 2009. All 3 of them were Buccaneers. Otherwise, we have Dolphins in 2014, they won. Jaguars in 2016, they won. Bengals in 2017, they won. Rams in 2018, they won. Dang it, I keep getting these lines all mixed up. It wasn't the Buccaneers twice. So it was loss, win, 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 and then it was a Rams loss, Buccaneers loss, and then the last 3 times we won. We beat the Buccaneers on September 5th, 25th, 2022. We beat the Colts. We beat the Titans. That was both of these games this year. So what's the new angle? And if it's away in Florida when it's hot, first of all, that makes no sense. But again, we're looking at all of them. There's obviously not very many. You've got the Bucs the Bucks, the Jaguars, the Dolphins, and the Bucks, which would be what, 3-3? Going back to 2009? It's not a thing. It's really just not a thing. Again, 67% when the temperature's 80 degrees or higher, and they've basically dominated Florida for the last 15 years, with the exception of Tom Brady. I think this is just a complete narrative thing that has spun wildly out of control. And again, it's also another excuse that I'm just not gonna let slip by. There is no excuse. There's no curse in Florida for the Packers. That doesn't exist. They've done great in hot weather this year. Well, they're just bad in away games, period. Well, there is some truth to that, but let's just very succinctly define how true that is. Packers in away games since Matt LaFleur got here in 2019, when they are at least 4-point favorites, the Packers win 67% of those. Not as many as you'd like, that's for sure. And they are 0 for 4 in their last 4 going back to last year. Well, going back 2 years. There was only one game last year. It was the Giants. We lost that game. And then 2022, there was the Lions, Commanders, and Lions again. We lost all 3 of those. You got to go back to 2021 was the last time they actually won one. But again, small sample size. Either way, I don't give a crap. There will be no excuses. Anyways, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll be right back. All right, so why don't we get started? We'll go through it, take a look at Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is a bit of an enigma because, he's first overall selection. He's this great elite quarterback, et cetera, but at the same time, he's never quite lived up to it, but he's never been bad. He's a good quarterback that maybe is getting somewhat of the AJ Hawk treatment where, if he was Jalen Hurts and was a second-round pick, it would be this great pick, but because he's kind of an underwhelming guy that makes some boneheaded mistakes, he doesn't get the recognition. He's been on a tear the last 3 weeks. However, the last 3 weeks have been Chicago's got a pretty good defense. Indy, Chicago, and New England. His grades in those games were 90, 78, and 86. But before that, it was pretty ugly. So he's currently at a 78 grade, 75 passing grade. He's got 1,500 yards, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He has 9 big-time throws, which is 4.1%, which is pretty high. 7 turnover-worthy plays, which, again, when you look at how lucky he's been with clearly some dropped interceptions, 7 turnover-worthy plays, only 3 interceptions. But still, that's 2.8%. That's not a terrible ratio on either side, I suppose. Yeah, I guess it's not that good. It's 9-7. But he has been heating up. Like most quarterbacks, he's not as good under pressure. I would say this is a pretty significant gap, though. They've given him an 83 grade, 82 passing grade when there's no pressure. 67% completion rate, 1,300 yards, 8.1 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, surprisingly. And he's really not under pressure very much. 71% of his dropbacks have come not under pressure. Under pressure, 29.2% of the time, he has 21 completions, completing just 45%, 44.7 to be exact, for 199 yards, just 4.2 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 53 passing grade. So, it's true of most quarterbacks. Pressure is going to help you. Not always. I mean, there are some guys that handle it really, really well, like C.J. Stroud. But Trevor Lawrence doesn't seem to be one of those. So getting pressure on him is going to be kind of a big deal. Their receivers. Let's take a look at it for who runs the most routes is how we'll sort it. Wide receiver 1 right now is Gabe Davis, who's been quite bad. He has a 56 grade, 217 yards, 2 touchdowns. Second is Christian Kirk, and he's been He has 25 receptions, 320 yards, and a touchdown. And then wide receiver 3 is actually kind of an interesting development here, is rookie first-round pick Brian Thomas out of LSU. I didn't realize he was doing quite as well as he has. It's been very up and down. 3 pretty bad games, 3 unbelievable games. And unfortunately, 3 of those, the 3 of them have come in the last 4 weeks. But Brian Thomas Wide receiver 3, and they're very close together. 197, 198, and 204. They're basically 1A, 1B, 1C. But Brian Thomas leads the team in receptions with 30. He leads the team in yards with 513. He leads the team in yards per reception with 17 yards per reception. The next highest is 12.8, and he has 4 touchdowns. So rookie Brian Thomas is I didn't realize it. He is certainly emerging. There's been a lot of names thrown around this year. He has not been one of them, but he's having a heck of a time here. Then you've got tight end Brenton Strange. He's got a 59 receiving grade, just 13 receptions, 131 yards, but 2 touchdowns on top of that. And then you're kind of getting down the line. The only 2 that have any significant amount of receptions would be running back Travis Etienne, 16 receptions, 91 yards. They give him a 68 receiving grade, which is eh. And then tight end Evan Ingram, who's been around for a little while, 16 receptions, 142 yards. So he certainly contributes. He actually has the second or third highest receiving grade after Travis Etienne, but just a 67.6 receiving grade. Looking at the yards per route run metric, wide receiver 1 is Brian Thomas Jr., after that is Evan Ingram. Those are the only 2 above a 2. Everybody else is below that line. Running backs, they've got some good ones here. Tank Bigsby has an 82.5 grade. He has 67 attempts, 415 yards, 6.2 yards per attempt, and 4 touchdowns. 4.58 yards after contact per attempt, and 25 missed tackles forced. Terrible receiver, but man, he is really having his way as a running back. Huge year 2 jump. I mean, year 1, he didn't actually play that much. I mean, he already has more attempts than he had all of last year. So if you're looking for if this is fake or not, it's hard to come to that conclusion. He did have a 70 grade last year. He only had 2.6 yards per attempt, but his worst game as far as yards per attempt, 3.4. So his entire season last year was 2.6. His worst game this year was 3.4. But yeah, Tank Bigsby is doing some damage here. Running back number 2 is Travis Etienne. He's also doing a decent job. Doesn't grade out nearly as well, but 55 attempts, 227 yards, 4.1 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns and a fumble, 65 grade. Just 2.45 after contact, 10 missed tackles forced. They've also got Dearness Johnson, 25 attempts, so probably see a little bit of him. 105 yards, that's 4.2 yards per attempt. All of those are decent, and he has a 75 rushing grade. Trevor Lawrence has 16 attempts. He's got some wheels. He's kind of an underrated. He's kind of a Josh Allen type. He's got 16 attempts, 95 yards, 5.9 yards per attempt. He has a 77 rushing grade. And then Brian Thomas also has 3 attempts. You got to watch him. He hasn't done a ton with it. He's got a 61 grade. And then also wide receiver Devin Duvernay. So that's 3 times to Thomas, 3 times to Duvernay. That's 6 times. You figure once per game, they're doing the old wide receiver running play. And then the most important, kind of tying this all together, they've got the talent, but do they have the offensive line? Well, we know about Cam Robinson. He is going to end up playing, despite the one Jacksonville Jaguars fan being really upset about it. It's the funniest thing ever. But Cam Robinson, 72 pass blocking grade, 65 run blocking grade. Pretty classic Packers grading there. Maybe a little low on the pass blocking, but it's, I guess you could say it's somewhat similar to Rasheed Walker. I mean, that would be the only comp that we have that would be close to it. Rasheed Walker has given up 2 more pressures. He's got a little bit high. Rasheed has a little bit higher of a pass blocking grade, but significant. I didn't realize Rasheed was doing that bad as a run blocker. I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was that bad for the season. But anyways, he's kind of like, I guess, a better run blocking version of Rasheed Walker. Slightly worse pass blocker, surprisingly. And I think the only reason he has a lesser grade, even though he has 2 less pressures, is because he has double the sacks. Rasheed Walker's given up 2 sacks. Cam has given up 4. All right, so that is their left tackle, and he will be going, so we don't need to worry about anybody else. Then they have Ezra Cleveland. Ezra Cleveland was a longtime Minnesota Viking, and he's off to he's doing a really good job, actually. Ezra was a kind of a terrible pass blocker. His grades in Minnesota, 52, 55, 54, 57. So far this year, 75. So for whatever reason, it just wasn't working in Minnesota the way it's working here in Jacksonville. But he's having a great time. We just check. Yeah, but week by week also. I mean, he's had one bad game against Chicago. He's been dominant as a pass blocker. The run blocking is also a 65. So the left side is pretty solid. Then you got at center Mitch Morse, 66 pass blocking, 62 run blocking. Pretty average, right? Nothing terrible there. Brandon Scherf, 72 pass blocking, 60 run blocking. Nothing wrong with that. And then right tackle looks like it might be the weakest spot on the line, Anton Harrison. He was a first. Who the heck is Anton? Did he change his name? Or am I just losing my freaking mind? I do not remember an Anton Harrison. He was a first-round pick anyways out of Oklahoma. And it hasn't super been panning out. He's got a 58, if I didn't say it already, pass blocking, 52 run blocking grade. He's given up 15 pressures, 2 sacks, statistically very similar to Rashid, but they hate him as a pass blocker. So overall, I mean, it's certainly, and remember, their offense is not the weak part of their team. I think they're a middle of the pack offense. It's certainly easy to see. Well, let me rephrase that. It feels like it has to be somewhat of a Jets situation where there's talent, but it doesn't come together because the organization sucks. Because it's not that they have elite talent really anywhere, because they don't, but they have enough good talent to be better than they are. Anyways, let's take a break. We'll look at the defense, and then we'll get out of here. We'll be right back. All right, let's work from the inside out. Take a look at these defensive pieces that they have. Defensive tackle number 1 is Devon Hamilton. He has a 53 53 grade, 47 run defense grade, 29 tackling grade, 53 pass rush grade, 7 pressures, 138 attempts. So their DT1 is horrifying. Then there's Roy Robertson Harris. I think he was a Bear for a while, wasn't he? Roy Robertson Harris? Yes, Chicago for 4 years. He's been with Jacksonville. Actually, I think he just went to Seattle. Yeah, he's a Seahawk now, so never mind. That's not even their DT2 anymore. It's hard to come up with a cutoff because, good Lord, they have these. They have a really heavy rotation with their defensive tackles. They've got about 5 after that. So there's Mason Smith, who is a second-round pick this year out of LSU. You may or may not remember him. He has not had the greatest start to his season. He did have one good game against Houston, and that's it. 55 grade, 54 run defense, 56 pass rush. He has 3 pressures on 80 attempts and 1 sack. That's really quite bad. He is apparently their DT2. Then you have Jeremiah Ledbetter. He was a 6th-round pick in 2017, originally in Detroit. He's on his 3rd team now. He has a 66 grade, 67 run defense, 51 pass rush, 2 pressures on 70 attempts, and just 1 sack. So he's more of a run defender than he is a pass rusher, clearly. Then you have Tyler Lacey. He has a 52 grade, 55 run defense, 51 pass rush, just 1 pressure this entire season, 57 attempts. It's not very much, but again, they're all close together as far as how many total snaps they have, so it's hard to really count anybody out. And then Esezi Otomewo, who 2022 5th-round pick, 46 grade, 29 run defense, but 71 pass rush. He has 8 pressures on 53 attempts and a sack, so he is a pure pass rusher, even though I think the numbers are probably a little high. Couple reasons I say that. He's only played 4 games, which is a small sample size. If you look at last year, he had 4 on 65, which is less than 10%. Also, this past game, the last game he played, which I don't know if he's even going to be playing in this game, 4 pressures on 17 attempts. So that really boosted his numbers because he had 1 big game. Bottom line, though, they don't have a strong interior. That's regardless of who plays, what the rotation is, etc. Not a lot going on there. Off the edge is really just a 3-man rotation. Edge number 1 is Trayvon Walker. He was a number 1 pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2022. It's kind of a kind of a bad pick. His rookie year, he had a 58 grade, 43 pressures, 5 sacks, and 480 attempts. Year 2, the pressure numbers and sack numbers actually look quite good, but PFF still said his pass rush sucked, gave him a 58 grade, 30 tackling, 49 run defense. This is his best year so far. He's got almost a 70 grade, 70 run defense, 49 tackling, 64 pass rush. He has 27 pressures, 5 sacks on 240 attempts, so it's decent. But he also has a 90 grade against Indy and then a 71 against New England. Everything else has been average or worse. And obviously, you take away his one game against Indy where he had a 90 grade. He had 7 pressures and 3 sacks in that game. Take that away, he's got 20 pressures and just 2 sacks on however many attempts. It would be about, 200? So he'd be right at 10% and just 2 sacks. Then they've got Josh Hines-Allen. This guy is a good football player. This was the Rashawn Gary draft class. Took him a little while. The first 2 years were a little bit iffy, not the best. And then 2021, he kind of took off. He had a 79 grade. Then it was an 85. Then it was an 89, actually about a 90 grade overall. So far this year, 85.6. So he's a talented guy for sure. 85.6 overall. 72 run defense. Tackling is not the greatest at 51, but an 88 pass rush grade. 29 pressures, 3 sacks on the season. It's very intermittent. It's 70, 90, 60, 80, 60, 60, 90. But he's a scary dude. So the edge is a little bit more concerning. You also have Eric Armstead, who is now 31 years old. So he's maybe losing a little bit of his edge. But he is their third guy in that sort of 3-man rotation. And he currently has a 66 grade, 65 run defense, 64 pass rush, 12 pressures, 178 attempts, 1 sack, which is pretty terrible. To make matters worse, he had a 90 grade last week against New England. You take that away along with his 4 pressures, and he's kind of having a terrible year. So there's guys to be afraid of for sure. I mean, Walker and Josh Allen are a pretty solid duo, but they're also a little inconsistent. So just need this to be a bad day. We need our tackles in Tom and Rashid to make sure that these are one of their down days. At linebacker, they've got Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd has turned into pretty good linebacker. He had a rough first year, and then after that, he was off to the races. Primarily a run defender. Even his rookie year, which was bad, he had a 70 run defense grade. But right now, 73 overall, 85 run defense, 90 tackling, 65 pass rush, 64 coverage. So it's pretty good across the board. He's a good football player. Then they have Ventrell Miller. He's got a 55 grade, although an 83 run defense grade, 35 coverage grade. It's not going very well there. He's given up 19 passes for almost 200 yards. Then they have Chad Muma, the Wyoming guy from 2022 draft class. He's at a 60 grade, pretty average across the board. And then Aluakon, who is the guy that was just activated off of IR. He had a good first 3 weeks, so much so that he had an 81 grade, 87 coverage. The rest wasn't quite as impressive, but the coverage grade was out of control. Then you got the corners. One of the boundary guys is Ronald Darby. He's almost 31 years old as well. Dude's been around for a while. Played for, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's with his 6th different team. Is his first year with Jacksonville. And one of his worst years, actually. The only year he's had that was worse as far as the grades was 2019 in Philly. It was his last year there. But 61.1 grade, 57 coverage grade. He's given up 29 receptions, 372 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 2 pass breakups. He has a 132.8 passer rating when targeted. So he's been a bit of a liability. And in fact, his first 3 weeks were his best. So he had a 62, 73, 74, and he hasn't had a good game since. Then you got Monteric Brown. He was a 2022 7th-round pick. He's having by far his best year. His coverage grades from 2022 on were 42, 55, and now 66. So it's gone straight up, but still not the best. 65 coverage grade. He's given up 29 receptions, 302 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 2 pass breakups, 105.5 passer rating when targeted. And then their slot corner is Jerrion Jones. He is a rookie third-round pick this year out of Florida State. He did have two very good games. Like a lot of these guys, it was against Indy and New England. Go figure. They're two games that they won against bad opponents where guys showed up and they ended up winning the game. Overall, he's sitting at a 64 coverage grade, but really that's just because of those two games. It was 53, 55, 50, 50, 81, 52, 83. So it's 50s across the board every single game except those two. He has given up 16 receptions, 189 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He has 3 pass breakups. All 3 were in those two games. Still a 98.5 pass rating when targeted. So this is a weak spot for this team is the corners. And then, as you already know, we've got some safety issues here, one of which is Darnell Savage. Now, Savage is their number 3 guy. He plays kind of that slot/safety role for them. I don't know how that works with the Jerrion Jones situation, but whatever. Safety number 1 is Andre Cisco. He's got a 57 grade, 57.5 coverage. It's not going very well. He was a third-round pick in 2021. He's having his worst year so far, not that he's ever really had a good year. His 2 best games were these past 2 weeks, but that's kind of a negative for him because it really goes to show how bad he's been. Despite having a 90 grade against Chicago and a 70 against New England, he's sitting at a 57.5 because before that it was 50, 60, 60, 50, 30. 13 receptions, 229 yards. He's given up 2 touchdowns, has 1 pick, 3 pass breakups, 116.5 passer rating when targeted. So that's not great. Antonio Johnson, 2023 5th-round pick, is safety number 2. He has a 45 grade and a 42 coverage grade. He has given up 14 receptions, 190 yards, 1 touchdown, 116.7 passer rating when targeted. And then our old friend Darnell Savage kind of started picking it up around week 5. And I don't mean picking it up by playing better. I just mean playing at all. He played week 1. He was out. And then he's played weeks 5, 6, and 7. He is having close to his worst year ever. I mean, he had that one terrible year in Green Bay. I know it feels like it was bad every year. It wasn't. He was actually good to average every year in Green Bay, except 2022. He's having one of those years. He has out of 48 PFF grade, 49 coverage grade. In the 4 games that he's played, he's given up 10 receptions for 94 yards and a touchdown with 1 pass breakup, 106 passer rating when targeted. So that's the biggest liability on this entire team is the secondary. The 3 corners, the 3 safeties, it's not good. Linebackers are decent. Edge is decent. Interior is not good. And that's where you have a bit of a disaster of a defense when really all you have are a couple pass rushers to try to figure out a way to win football games. It gets to be a problem. But just real quick, rip through these Detroit Lions against Tennessee again. They're 11.5-point favorites. I don't expect anything crazy to happen here. Anything can happen, but probably the least likely outcome would be a Lions loss. Fingers crossed. Atlanta Falcons, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You got 2 NFC teams there, so that's going to be a good one, kind of no matter who loses. Bengals and Philly. Go Bengals. Bengals are 2.5-point favorites. You got Cardinals, Miami. Miami's 4.5-point favorites, so that's a good one for us. Again, we're racing against the entire NFC, not just the NFC North. Buffalo and Seattle, so that's a good one for us. Buffalo, 3-point favorites. Chargers, Saints. Chargers are 7-point favorites. Not that the Saints are much of a threat, but there you go. And then you got Bears, Washington. Now, of course, you want Washington to beat the Chicago Bears. But with Washington's, I know they listed him as questionable, but every time I look at it, it's like pretty much a guarantee he's not playing. Maybe some kind of miraculous thing happens. It's an afternoon game. Get a little bit of extra time to work him out. I don't know. I hate to give the Bears this much credit, but I struggle to imagine Washington winning without their quarterback. The good news is Washington's been beating the living crap out of everybody. So to kind of soften the blow, assuming the Bears win, it is a good thing to have Washington drop a game. Carolina, Denver, I mean, AFC, NFC doesn't matter in that situation. I couldn't care less. Chiefs, Raiders, I hope the Raiders find a way to win, but they won't. Chiefs are going to go on to be undefeated, even though they don't deserve it. And then we got Dallas, San Francisco, which is just going to be a great game. The 49ers, 4.5-point favorites. If the 49ers win, which they probably will, I don't know. Then we get more meltdown from Dallas, which is great. Dallas just plummets into basically their season is done. If Dallas finds a way to win, perfect. I would prefer that because Dallas is still bad, but now the San Francisco 49ers just continue to spiral down into nothingness. So obviously job number one, Packers win. After that, the rest of that is just a bonus. Really, we're just kind of competing against ourselves here. Just don't lose. But it's good to keep an eye on this stuff, try to keep pace, et cetera, et cetera. But I got to get out of here. You guys have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.